What we have today for you folks is really a morning after analysis of what happened with the Biden interview on ABC News last night. And man, there are a lot of ramifications. A lot of you may have seen our immediate response that we had a show last night where we talked about some of the issues. But now overnight we have had a chance to digest some of that, and some of the more really important ramifications are starting to come out here. And we have really nobody better to discuss some of this with than Kelley Vlahos, who is, but she's got so many qualifications here. She's the senior advisor at Quincy Institute, editorial director of Responsible Statecraft, and the host of the Trip the Beltway Fantastic podcast. Kelley, we're really grateful for you to come on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Danny. Always good to see you.
Man, let's just get right into it because there's a lot of stuff to divulge or dive into here. First of all, I want to play one of what I thought was one of the more memorable points of that discussion last night. Check this out.
If you are told reliably from your allies, from your friends and supporters in the Democratic Party, in the House and the Senate, that they're concerned you're going to lose the House and the Senate if you stay in, what will you do?
I'm not going to answer that question. It's not going to happen.
So just let me ask you, first of all, what was your impression of that comment? Because that was kind of central to everybody was wondering when we went in there, is he going to announce he's stepping aside? Is it going to be a thing for he's going to, show he's back on track, et cetera? So we didn't know. So that was a key question of, are you going to stay in? And he said, absolutely, I'm not going to get out. What did you think of that?
Wasn't really too surprised. I mean, the reports throughout the week had his inner circle being very adamant that he was staying in. There were several reports of meetings that he had with top donors and other influencers in the Democratic Party in which he said, absolutely, I'm not getting out of the race. This amid a ton of noise that said the opposite, that not so much that there were reports that he said he was getting out, but that there had been increasing pressure from the Democratic Party operatives, top aides, whatever, saying that he needs to step aside. So I wasn't too surprised. I was absolutely surprised at his using this idea that he was indispensable to the nation, that we are in an indispensable nation, trotting out the Madeleine Albright trope, but that he was indispensable too. And I found that kind of, not so much arrogant, but it just seemed to be disregarding reality, particularly when he talked about NATO and he talked about putting down Putin. It just seemed altogether ignorant of current realities on the ground, and it made me a little bit more skeptical, if not nervous, about the next 4 years if he were to win again in November.
Yeah. And for anybody who may have missed that, here it is.
Not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world. And that's not how it sounds like hyperbole. But we are the essential nation in the world. Madeleine Albright was right. We don't walk away from our allies. We stand with them. We don't let tyrants win. We oppose them. We don't merely watch global events unfold. We shape them. That's what it means to be the indispensable nation. That's what it means to be the world's superpower and the world's leading democracy. But this.
Yeah, you see, this is not anything new for him, but I did too, because the language he specifically used there, I'm running the world. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Who elected you the global president? I must have missed that part here. But if that's actually his mentality, and it's gone way beyond the Madeleine Albright thing of we're indispensable, we're more important because we help things. Now he's just saying, I outright run it. And I think that's either A, disconnected from reality, as you said, or B, a profound arrogance that can get us into major trouble if he acts on that belief.
Well, one of the things has always bothered me about this argument, or at least this conversation throughout the week since the outrageous debate performance, has been, please, and this is, the arguments from his inner circle, from top Democrats, please do not look at the delivery, the performance of the debate, but look at his performance as president over the last 2.5 years. Well, I do look, and I'm looking at foreign policy specifically, and that's making me more wary and nervous about the future than even his debate performance, because we see the failures of the Ukraine war policy in real time today. He talks about bringing Putin down. Putin is winning in Ukraine today. Putin and Russia are in a better position, have more leverage when they do eventually get to the negotiating table than they did a year ago, 2 years ago. We see what's happening in Gaza. There is the biggest human rights crisis in modern history is happening and unfolding right now in Gaza. 2 million people are starving on the brink of famine, and cannot move. Everywhere they go, they're being bombed. And those were our bombs with our resources funding this war. He can't get that ceasefire plan that he was bragging about during the debate passed. So I don't know what he's talking about, or what his aides are talking about when they say look at his performance in the last 2.5 years, because I feel less secure. I feel like our interests are being ignored and denied every day. I wake up and look what's happening in Europe. I look what's happening in Israel, and the hostility and the tensions and with China have gotten no better over the last 2.5 years. So I don't know what he's talking about. And so this he raises this issue of how he's running the world. And I feel like that should give people pause even more than his delivery and this question over his cognitive abilities.
Let me just kind of pile on to what you just said there. There's not a thing you said that I disagree with there, but let's go that prior to his taking office and prior to all these issues or decisions and actions he's been taking on all the policy issues you just described, Russia and China today are closer than they have ever been, and that's only going to get stronger to our detriment. He now has an actual military alliance with North Korea. He has something close to a military alliance, and certainly with physical weapon production and ammunition from Iran. He's making more economic deals with Vietnam and several other nations. All of those things are a result of what he's trying to do by, quote, running the world. And he is making the world stronger and more antagonistic against us. That's the adversaries. Then you take on heading into just days from now, the supposed to be celebration of the 75th anniversary of NATO. You have two NATO members, Orban of Hungary and Fico of Slovakia, who were saying, hey, we need to be talking about peace to Vladimir Putin. We're stupid for not talking to Putin. So you're seeing a dividing of NATO. So everywhere you want to look, friends or adversaries alike, we're getting weaker with this kind of leadership. And that is the more important issue.
You're absolutely right, Danny. And he also brought up this idea that he has conjured or is shepherding this Middle East agreement, this Middle East peace. And he's referring, of course, to the Abraham Accords and the outreach to Saudi Arabia, trying to get Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel. And in the course of that, as we know, as all the reporting has indicated, that he's willing to give Saudi Arabia access to nuclear power. It's supposed to be civilian power, but access to nuclear power nonetheless, as well as a security pact by the United States, meaning he's willing to offer Saudi Arabia U.S. defense via our men and women if they are attacked. A security pact on par with what we're giving, Korea after the Korea War all the way up into today, just for normalization with Israel. And he's bragging about this. And in my heart of hearts, I don't believe the American people want to give Saudi Arabia not only a defense pact, but nuclear power, which could lead to all sorts of proliferation issues in the Middle East. But yet he boasts about this, even though this whole Abraham Accords normalization was put into motion by this Trump administration, and B, no one in their right minds thinks it's going to lead to any Middle East peace. It just seems like a way for the United States to get more entrenched militarily in the Middle East and push China and Russia at bay, who have been sort of making inroads into that region. So I feel like the things that he was bragging about last night, what he's done, quote unquote, are things that we just need to be very skeptical of, and are other reminders that he hasn't been a good steward of U.S. power or
Yeah.
U.S. strength in the world in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most weighty things that we can get into. But then when you add on top of that, these clear cognitive declines, and you have a witch's brew of potential trouble. Now, I want to jump back to one of the things that was said in the speech or in the interview last night, where Stephanopoulos was asking him, would you step aside if your friends started telling you that? Gary, we have that video, right? Or I may have gotten it out of order. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go to something different. So Stephanopoulos at one point said, "Hey, if your friends and close colleagues ask you to step down, would you?" And he says that's not going to happen. But then,
if you are told reliably from your allies, from your friends and supporters in the Democratic Party, in the House and the Senate, that they're concerned you're going to lose the House and the Senate if you stay in, what will you do?
I'm not going to answer that question. It's not going to happen.
So it's just not going to happen. Well, as it turns out, earlier that same day in the Washington Post, there was a headline that said that, Gary, if you could toss that one up there, that Senator Mark Warner works to gather Senate Democrats to ask Biden to exit the race. And part of that, part of that article said there is, as chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Warner is viewed as a serious voice privately advocating for the president to step aside. And he says that there's a growing consensus among state Senate Democrats that the situation with the Biden at the top of the ticket is simply untenable, and that senators are trying to determine the best way to relay that message to an insulated president. Some senators don't think Biden has the people around him who are giving him an accurate picture of the fallout. Now, that was actually reinforced after the debate when George Stephanopoulos was talking about his interview, when he said this on ABC News.
The president is talking to a lot of people, but he appears to be listening to a very tight circle.
A very tight circle, and administration officials I have spoken to said that very tight inner circle is telling them he can win, that he needs to keep going. This, of course, includes his wife, Jill, who they said is lashing out at those who want him to get out of the race.
Lashing out, man. What do you have any of your contacts in here in Washington, D.C., that give you any insight into, that dynamic between Warner and those who are apparently on the outside of the circle, and then this small coterie of people on the inside who are insulating President Biden? How is that dynamic playing out, and how does that portend anything good for the Democratic Party in this election?
I don't have any, unlike lots of other journalists in Washington, I can't brag or boast of having Democratic operatives blowing up my phone and telling me inside things about what's happening in the White House today. So I'm reading the same things that you are, Danny. One of the pieces that struck me as quite insightful late last week, I think it was in Axios, talked about this inner circle, and this inner circle being Joe Biden, Ted Kaufman, who was 83 years old and has been a longtime aide of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and I don't even know if Hunter Biden was in this. It was Biden's younger sister, who is a couple years younger than him. Those four are the sort of the nucleus of the Biden administration or political team. And between those four, these four decided when Biden was going to run for re-election, and they're deciding whether or not he's going to step down. And they have been pretty adamant that he won't. But I think the American people are looking at this and they're saying, this is not a monarchy. This is a democracy. And it's not cool that the only people that he's really listening to are his family members and one friend from like 50 years who's older than he is, and not the advice of the party that he's ahead of and the American people. And it does seem that this presidency has moved into this strange monarchical space where he gets to decide and not the American people or even the party for whom they nominated to run for president in 2020 and won, and who he ostensibly still leads. And so I feel like there needs to be some reckoning as to what the presidency of the United States is, and how these issues of whether someone runs or not, or listens to his party, or listens to his top leadership, and whether or not that is his decision or should be somebody else's decision, like the American people. And I feel like that conversation's not happening enough.
And I think that, we're definitely going to get to that point here. And one of the things Biden himself has been hammering over the last couple of days is a statement that, hey, the people voted for me, the Democratic people. I won the election and the nomination fair and square. And then so they're the ones that decide, and I'm going to go, ergo democracy.
Yeah.
But I think it's a fair point to say that those people voted for you on the assumption that you could do the job. And if it's now starting to be evident that you can't, then that's a different story. Now, all of a sudden, you're not taking into consideration the people. But not paying attention to reality and the things that are evident on the ground is another hallmark of what Biden and this close coterie of people are doing. Because one of the other things he said was, when he was asked in the interview, do you believe, or according to the polls, you're way down in the poll, you're starting to go down in the polls? And he said, no, that's not true. And so,
I've heard from dozens of your supporters over the last few days, and a variety of views. I grant you that. But the prevailing sentiment is this. They love you. And they will be forever grateful to you for defeating Donald Trump in 2020. They think you've done a great job as president, a lot of the successes you outlined. But they are worried about you and the country, and they don't think you can win. They want you to go with grace, and they will cheer you if you do. What do you say to them?
I say the vast majority are not where those folks are. I don't doubt there's some folks there. Have you ever seen a group at time when elected officials running for office aren't a little worried? Have you ever seen that? I've not. Same thing happened in 2020. Oh, Biden, I don't know, man. What's he going to do? He may bring me down. He may.
Mr. President, I've never seen a president at 36% approval get reelected.
Well, I don't believe that's my approval rate. That's not what our polls show.
So that I just don't believe that. But CNN, ordinarily a stalwart for supporting the President Biden in particular, said, yeah, about that. The president, this is something that was out actually earlier today. The president said that all of his pollsters characterized the race as a toss-up as he began to point to specific polls before trailing off, as you see on that bottom part of the screen there, which, by itself is like another problem that he can't even finish the sentence. But let's look at what the polls actually do say. Here's 538 poll, which carries a conglomerate of all the major polls here. And you see that since the 27th of June, on the day of the debate, look at what has happened. It is absolutely all the way through today. It is continuing on a growing chasm between Trump and Biden in the favor of Trump. And there's no reason to think, especially after that debate, that he did anything to quell that. So the people, many of whom voted for him, are already starting to waver on that, and he's going down the polls. So what is this? Do you have any concerns about him just not being willing to look at what's self-evidently on the polling information?
Yeah, I mean, just to get it back to foreign policy for a second, this seems to be his MO. I mean, he has been rigidly pro Israel, or at least he has been rigidly in support of everything that Israel has done since October 7th, in the face of growing disenchantment in the United States. He's dismissed the protests as being sort of an anomaly or a marginal phenomenon. He's dismissed the fact that there are voters in the Democratic Party who are hitting non-committed or writing in non-committed during the primary season. He has disregarded all of the concerns about the human rights violations within his own administration. He has people who are resigning daily over the fact that we are not even keeping to our own laws, in which we say that we cannot give weapons to units and countries that are abusing our weapons and causing human rights violations. and keeping food and medicine from civilians. He's disregarding that. So I feel like he's been in a denialism mode for a long time. I find it more concerning on the foreign policy front because these are like millions of lives at stake. What's going on in Ukraine? I mean, the fact that they don't have enough men to fight anymore and that they're pulling guys out of streets and throwing them into vans because they're so desperate. Yeah. While we sit here fat, dumb, and happy and just sending billions of dollars over and more weapons to make them to continue that fight, even though every expert worth his salt has said that this thing can't be won militarily on the battlefield. Like he denies that too. So this is about par for Biden. I'm not saying that it's not distressing what he's saying about his electoral possibilities, but I just find that I'm not too surprised. What I thought was telling was the way he just dismisses out of hand when George Stephanopoulos asked him, like, should you leave the race? What do you believe of these concerns? And he just says, not true, staying in. And that kind of reflects somebody who doesn't have a good grasp of an argument as to why he should stay in. He's just kind of like just sort of like this reactionary, like a teenager would if you told them, like, hey, we heard that you stole that car. Not true. Okay. I'm not saying he's a teenager. I'm just saying that
no, definitely
he
not.
doesn't seem to have a good grasp of, or he doesn't have the ability to make a passionate argument as to why he should stay in.
Okay, and so let's throw one more into that, also from the debate, where he said he actually is the one that stopped Putin.
George, I'm the guy that put NATO together, the future. No one thought I could expand it. I'm the guy that shut Putin down. No one thought could happen.
Okay, nobody said you could expand NATO. In fact, that's what it's been doing since 1997. So I'm not sure what he's talking about there, but definitely don't know what he's talking about that I shut down Putin. As you articulated just moments ago, Putin is stronger than he was. He's growing stronger by the month. So I don't know what he's talking about.
I don't know what he's talking about. I feel this, and what bothers me about this is that put together with this news or this reportage that he has this very tight inner circle, it gives the impression that he doesn't know that Putin is winning in Ukraine. He doesn't know the daily advancements that the Russian military has made over the course of the last year. He doesn't know the desperation of the troops on the ground in Ukraine, or he does and he's ignoring them. So both possibilities are really unnerving. That he doesn't know, that his inner circle is not telling him, or he just chooses to believe the opposite. But it does kind of rankle one when he talks about how nobody thought I could expand NATO, but I did. What does that even mean? I mean, he personally did not expand NATO to Finland and Sweden, although we know that the United States pretty much is in control of NATO. But is that indicative that it's going to expand further? Is he saying the quiet part out loud? This whole idea that Ukraine
is that even a good idea to
expand
NATO? We can go there too, but
yeah, and he, what will be interesting, Danny, is that he's slated to speak at this NATO anniversary summit this week in Washington, and all eyes of the world are literally going to be on him because the reports this week in the major newspapers have all been that international leaders are concerned. They're now thinking of what a future Trump administration is going to look like. And so when he comes to Washington, or he makes his speech in Washington, there'll be all sorts of tea leaf reading, but also a bit of skepticism that what he's saying is really going to have any salience because he might not be here the same time next year. So, I mean, there's a lot at stake for when he does take the stage this week.
And let me add on to that something, Kelley, because on the one hand, people are going to say, okay, well, he'll be reading from a teleprompter, so there's the chances of a gaffe, is not that great there. But let me show you something he read off a teleprompter on the 4th of July. And there are two issues that have in that very short little 4-minute speech. Watch this with a teleprompter.
You know, I was in that World War I cemetery in France, and the one that one of our colleagues, the former president, didn't want to go and be up there. I probably shouldn't even say it anyway. And by the way, I've been all over the world with you. I've been in and out of battles anyway. You're incredible.
I mean, that's almost exactly what he did during the debate. So you see, this is not getting better. It's not going. It's coming in and out. It's just going to continue to get worse, and so it's no guarantee that he'll be able to get through that, even on with the teleprompter in front of the world's eyes, as you point out.
Yeah, and you know, I the entire week since the debate, I wrote a piece about this for Responsible Statecraft. I was more, as I said earlier, more concerned about the implications of foreign policy. And both Trump and Biden were awful on foreign policy in this debate. What concerns me, besides the foreign policy, I have never made a joke. I have never indulged making fun of Biden. I am more concerned about like his dignity. I mean, we all, most of us believe that people should grow old and exit the stage with human dignity. And I'm appalled that if Jill Biden is lashing out at others without seeing what's happening and what everybody can see happening on the stage. I wonder if he's being given the right advice by this close coterie of family, and why they wouldn't want to see him leave and exit the stage with that human dignity. Because right now, every time he seems to be behind a microphone or on camera, it's cementing the idea that he's old and he's feeble, and it's not fair. Honestly, I have no laugh in me. I have no desire to make fun of him at all.
Well, Kelley, I know you're going to have to run here in a minute. Before we let you go, I want you to weigh in on what may be one of the more disturbing issues of it. You've touched on it a little bit here, but Maureen Dowd in the New York Times said what a lot of people are thinking. She said out loud, or wrote down anyway. Gary, if you can pull that up there. She wrote Joe Biden's blind spot. But inside this article, she wrote that now Biden has lost some of his moral high ground because he hid the evidence of cognitive deterioration. Trump is the master con man, but Biden is giving him a run for his money. He, his wife, his vice president, his longtime aides worked hard to conjure a mirage where everything is fine from Biden world. And then there toward the end, we don't know who is running the country. We only know who shouldn't be, the president and the former president. So you see right there, they're asking a question that's kind of implied in what you just said there. Who's actually running the play? Who's writing these teleprompters speeches? Does he know what's going on outside? And that's a valid question.
Yeah, it's a valid question. As others would say, this has been going on for a long time. So it didn't start with a debate. People have been drawing attention to his performances, his gaffes, the apparent feebleness on the campaign trail, everything from the way he walks and some of the not that's the stuttering. It's just sort of like the gaping mouth and not being able to finish the sentence. This has been going on for a long time. And conservatives on social media have been seizing upon these moments, and they've been making them viral throughout the last year or so. And the liberal media has quickly retorted that they're cheap fakes, and it's just a political hyperbole coming from the right and whatnot. You know the whole score, but unfortunately, there is a trail that goes back, and it could even go all the way back to the 2020 election, where people were questioning, his campaigning from the basement and using COVID as a way to sort of mask the fact that he couldn't do the rigorous campaign schedule. So, yeah, there are plenty of people who are saying, yeah, well, Biden is to blame as much as anyone else, because he knew his age and some of his frailties at the time, and he insisted on running because he wanted to be president so badly. and then the reelection and the bid to keep going. He was aware too, so he has agency. But I don't know. Somebody's got to tell him. I mean, what you just showed me, that clip. Were they at a World War I cemetery when those Trump comments were supposedly made in France? I don't know. Like, I don't know the backstory enough, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got the wars mixed up, because he's been doing a lot of that lately.
Yeah.
He said something about Mark Warner trying for the nomination at some point last night, Senator Warner, in the Stephanopoulos interview. And I didn't watch the interview. I've read the transcript, but people were seizing on that in Twitter, and they're like, Mark Warner never made a bid for presidency. What is he talking about? So it's they're little things, and people can say, oh, well, Trump says all sorts of crazy, nutty things. He said that Nikki Haley was in control, or she was responsible for January 6th. And, like, okay, we know that, but this is the president and he's in charge. Right now he is commander in chief, and they think he people are seizing on this for a reason.
Yeah, and so I know you're going to have to run here in just a second, but I have heard a number of people of late, especially in the foreign policy, actually think Jake Sullivan may be calling more of the shots than President Biden. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that before you head out.
Yeah, I mean, I have not had any confidence in any of the national security team in the Biden administration since day one. This whole idea that the adults were coming back into the room, that they were going to restore United States leadership throughout the world has been, you want to talk about a mirage. They attempted and failed to create a mirage that they were the adults in the room, that they were serious diplomats, that, like, there was this establishment that was ready to take charge and restore some mythology that the United States was this global leader, and they failed from like the gate out. We saw that in Afghanistan and that pathetic withdrawal. We needed to get out of Afghanistan.
Right.
That wasn't the point. It's the way that it happened. And he's paying for that politically. But then you have that, and then Ukraine. I mean, we've talked about that endlessly on your show. And now Gaza. Gaza is the real heartbreaker. I don't care what you think about Hamas or Palestinians or what have you. This is not in the best interests of the United States, what's happening there. So if you want to take it the bare bones realist argument, what is happening there is going to blow back, and it's already blowing back against us. We have shown no leadership. We have used no leverage. So if Jake Sullivan and Antony Blinken are the adults in the room, wow, that's horrifying.
Right. All right. Well, listen, we'll leave it right there for right now. I'm going to cover a couple of other things here but I know that you've got to run, and I want to remind everybody to watch your Trip the Beltway fantastic podcast where you can get a lot more Kelley from what you saw here. So thanks ever so much for coming on today, Kelley. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Danny. See you soon.
See you soon. And a couple of other things I want to talk about here before we let you go today, because there's some important things that go along with this. A lot of people have been wondering, what's the Trump team doing with this? What is their play on this? Are they going to try to highlight some of this? And I actually spoke this morning with one of the senior advisors on the Trump campaign, and they said that his philosophy right now is to kind of just like say, let's let this ride itself out. Let's let Joe Biden write his own ticket here because he doesn't need any help. And if he keeps going the way he's going to, he'll take care of it. So you probably won't see Trump say too much about the debate or about the cognitive decline of Biden here. I think you'll probably see him turn more towards Kamala Harris because that's what seems to be the case so far. Apparently he has some new nickname for her. I haven't seen what it is, but apparently he's trying out some things here because it's starting to look like he thinks that's who he may end up facing. And that's actually one of the other questions is if Biden is withdrawn here, if he ever does, whether it's, kicking and screaming, or if he finally comes to the realization that it's time to move on, the question is going to be, who is going to be next in line? So the most likely candidate is going to be Kamala Harris for a number of reasons. Now, she had, especially the first year of the administration, the absolute worst approval ratings of any vice president in modern history, which is pretty remarkable, especially coming in the first year when usually you start off on a high and then whittle down over time. But there's also issue of fundraising and where the money can be used within American law. So if the Biden-Harris team turns into the Harris team, the money that's been raised up to this point, and I forget what the number is, but it's in the hundreds, probably hundreds of millions. It's quite a large stash so far. All that can be used for her. But if she is replaced also, if they bring another person in like Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, several other people who have been talked about, that money can't go to them. And then they would be starting scratch. They would also be starting scratch from the name recognition nationally. And certainly a lot of people know who Gavin Newsom is name-wise, but that also comes with a double-edged sword because there are also many people are aware of the disastrous situation going on in California, especially with their financial situation being turned upside down, going from a budget surplus to a budget deficit. All kinds of other social issues seem to be just disintegrating in California. So that's probably not a good bet. Gretchen Whitmer, hardly anybody knows who she is outside of her state. So it just doesn't seem reasonable that either of those two would go. And I don't know if there's really anybody else plausible. So the most likely candidate, the one that has the least amount of negatives, would be Kamala Harris. And I'm sure that I remember it was just 6 months ago that I saw a clip. I'm not sure when the clip itself was, where she was being interviewed and the person said, "Hey, so just curious about, do you think if it came to it that you would be able to be president of the United States?" He literally didn't get the question all the way out of his mouth. And she said, "Yes, absolutely." So she has some interest in the job. And so we'll see how that's going to work out. But the question really that we don't know the answer to, who would be her running mate? And that is a wide open situation. There's probably a number of senators in the Democratic Party that might be willing to do that. They would try to match her with somebody, who has a good reputation and somebody that would be kind of centrist, but could also pull additional votes. They may get somebody who's probably more on the talk of who would be something that could pull some votes away from some of the MAGA people. So it's unclear who that might be, and there's just wide open. But obviously, all these things are totally up in the air right now because the Democratic Party itself is hardly unified behind even Kamala Harris. This is actually a headline I saw from last year when Nancy Pelosi was actually asked something about Kamala Harris and whether she should remain on the ticket even. And this is a year ago. And they asked Pelosi, "Well, what do you think about Harris?" And she said, "Well, that's not for me to decide. So it's whatever he thinks." So she had a chance to endorse her to say, yeah, she's good, or that somebody else should be the case. And she refused. So that's a year ago. So that tells you what she really thinks about it. We'll see if she says anything here in the near term. But there's another issue, an additional issue for the Democrats that they've got to worry about, aside from whatever Biden wants or doesn't want. It's what happens down ballot. And that's more important than you may think, and something that many of the Democrats are paying a great deal of attention to. And that's actually part of what was animating Senator Warner in that article I showed you earlier from the Washington Post, where he was saying Biden should step aside. Part of his motivation was because of down ballot pressure. Because if people lose confidence in the president and in the party, and if they think that the party can't handle somebody who's in clear cognitive decline, then that may also cast questions about what their ability to lead anything. And so now then you have House and Senate races, and this could turn into a complete fiasco in a disaster, not just in the White House, but also in the House and Senate races, which are crucial for whoever wins about the legislative agenda going forward. So there is a lot at stake for the Democrats here, and something they're going to have to be paying a lot of attention to. Really, one of the last things I want to talk about here is Gary, if we could play that one again where Biden says, "I'm running the world." I want to make some comments on that, but let me refresh you what he said on that.
George, I'm the guy that put NATO together, the future. No one thought I could expand it. I'm the guy that shoved Putin down. No one thought could happen. Not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world. And that's not how it sounds like hyperbole. But we are the essential nation in the world. Madeleine Albright was right.
You know what? Madeleine Albright wasn't right. Joe Biden is not right. And this is no endorsement for President Trump or anybody else for that issue, because this is really, I think, something that extends beyond any individual campaign or candidate, because we kind of have bought into that, or at least many have. Not everybody. Thankfully, not everybody has. But the United States is not the global leader in terms of like with dictatorial powers. We're running the world. That's what he said. That's what he believes. We played that clip many times on here from October of last year, where Biden says we're the most powerful country in the world. In the history of the world, we're the most powerful. He believes this. And folks, if you believe this, then you may take actions that are something that can't be sustained and can't be accomplished. And if you attempt to accomplish things thinking that because you were elected president of the United States, that you have powers to do things beyond that and to tell other countries in every other part of the world what to do, then you are setting us all up for disaster. And listen, this extends to the Senate, to the House, to a lot of these so-called experts that come on TV that always want to talk about using American military power to force this country to do that, or compel this other country to take action that we want, or don't do something we don't want. And what's been the result of it, folks? Just look at it. I mentioned it earlier in this episode here, but let's focus on it for a minute. It's crucial. Since we've been employing this in the Biden administration, and this does extend way before that. I mean, you could literally go all the way back to the Clinton and maybe the Bush II administration. We want to lead with power. We want to lead with combat power to compel compliance with our preference on things. And at the end of the Cold War, in the 1990s, you could do that. Because whether it was right or not, you could, because nobody else was strong enough to stand up to us. Europe was compliant. They're going to do whatever we say anyway, even though we went against their wishes in many cases, like the 2003 Iraq War. But they're still going to be compliant and do whatever we want. China was too weak to do anything about it. They were still trying to get out of being a peasant army, and they couldn't hardly defend their borders, much less were a threat to anyone else. The Soviet Union had just collapsed. So literally we could and did do whatever we wanted. That was decades ago, and that is no longer the case. Now you have a much more powerful economically and militarily power in China in the Indo-Pacific, and you have now Russia, which had been diminished in the first year or year and a half of that war, are now on a path to get stronger. So they are already past where they started. They are now stronger and bigger militarily than when they started. Their economy has actually expanded and grown and gotten stronger, while Western Europe, or all of Europe, rather, for that matter, has gotten more tepid and has definitely not kept pace on their growth. So you see, everything that we've been trying to do has been backfiring. You see that the alliance between China and Russia is stronger, between Russia and North Korea. Now, literally a military alliance. You have the strength between Russia and Iran. So they're now providing weapons, all of these things. And there's many other countries that they're doing this as well. You have the global South that's getting upset about what's been going on. And they're taking the side because of what Kelley mentioned there, not just in the Russia-Ukraine war, but also in the Middle East with our actions with Israel. So they're starting to have less and less interest in the United States. You have the BRICS, the Economic Forum. They're going to have another summit in October in which they could grow even larger apparently by a considerable number. So there is a movement to try to the de-dollarization. All of these things keep going because of our belief, our stated belief that we are leading the world, that we are running the world. And all we're doing is running ourselves into the ground. That is the reality. That is the truth. Whether anybody in the Democratic Party or anybody that's running anything in America wants to believe it, that is the graphic depicted truth. The longer we go to ignore these patent self-evident truths, the more trouble we're going to get ourselves into. Up to this point, it can just be embarrassing, and we can reverse some of these things. But taken far enough and continued on, we could find ourselves sucked into a war in the Indo-Pacific with China over Taiwan. We could find ourselves in a conflict even with Russia if things go south. if we keep pushing bad positions right there. We're about to have this NATO summit where you're going to see us just, celebrate to the world this powerful organization, et cetera, oblivious to all these things I'm talking about right there. And as I'm going to talk about it in a subsequent episode, I'm going to get into those details later. You have a split even within NATO, where you have Hungary and Slovakia are moving in a definite direction contrary to what we're doing, and other people are paying attention. Our adversaries are paying attention. We're fraying. We're getting weaker, not stronger. We're oblivious to reality, what we're trying to accomplish, what the ends and the means are to even accomplish what we say we want to. There's no path to it. And other people around the world, in Asia, in the global South, in the Middle East, they're watching all of these things, and they hear these absurd words that are self-evidently not true, and it's continuing to deteriorate our ability to lead anyone anywhere, or even to influence people on things that are of importance to the United States. Folks, this is a lot bigger, quite frankly, than whether Joe Biden should step down or whether he should let someone else run. It's bigger even than who's going to win this next election, because these mentalities have been perpetuating over decades, and we have to make a change. We need to start elevating leaders who want to have sober minds and who are willing to accomplish things that can be attained, who we have the resources to do, and that is accomplishable and that has a positive outcome. And if you don't start recognizing that our power is limited and that there are other people with other interests around the world, that the more that they quit listening to us, the worse our situation is going to get. We're going to find ourselves in real trouble one of these days. The signs are there. And it's time for us to start soberly paying attention to them, because check this out. Right now, as we're making this on the 6th of July, 2024, all the bad things, none of the bad things have happened so far. There's some bad trends, and there's some concerning and troubling things that could happen on the horizon, but they haven't yet. If we were to start to make a change, and I know it's hard to move that, the Queen Mary, so to speak, in a big ship. You can't just turn the wheel and have that thing pivot. You're going to have to start going slowly. But if we can start moving that ship now and start getting more quality leaders in positions of authority, to where we can start taking actions that move things in a direction that are useful and helpful, then we can still avoid some of these worst outcomes. And in fact, we can have a bright future for ourselves, for our friends, and in the global community writ large. We can get along with China. We can get along with Russia, with North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, all kinds of countries in Africa, in the Middle East. We can get along with a lot of these people. Whether we like them or not, we can get along with them and make a world where everyone has a chance to live in stability and peace, at least as much as it's dependent upon us. We can help a lot of those things, but we can also stop making things worse. And that's really where we're at right now in July of 2024. That's what we need to be paying attention to. The positive possibilities for the future. We haven't gone over the edge yet, and I pray to God that we don't. That's why we have this channel, folks. That's why we're having this episode here today. We're going to tell you that as bad as things are and the trends that are there, there's still time. And it's with people like you who are watching this, pass this on to other people. Show them there is another way. There is a different viewpoint. It's not just that U.S. thinks it's running the world and it's going to go off a cliff one of these days. It's not ordained, and there is still time to change. So be sure to like and subscribe to this channel, folks. And truly, it's a lot bigger issue than just giving us more likes and whatever, because we like to have a good video. We are all in this together. And I know a lot of you people, because I read some of these comments here, you have a lot of concerns, and so do I. That's why we put the channel together, and you can help us. You can help us expand this by liking this and then sharing it with all the people on your, your channel, your social media contacts, all the different platforms you have. We ask you to share this broadly and widely so that we can maybe one of these days, have this Daniel Davis Deep Dive Army we've talked about. If you join in, you get some of the perks that we've talked about earlier. There's things that we can all do together. And the bigger our numbers get, the more influence that we can all have together. And I invite you to join with us, not just on the click, but in this movement we have, because we want to make a difference in the future. I thank you very much for listening today. God bless you all, and we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.